Everyone to this week's Global Intelligence Update. And this week we've got a great guest with us as always, Alex Pryor. And if you don't know who Alex Pryor is, let me give you guys a quick introduction. Alex is globally recognized with technology, leadership, innovation, being a speaker, and being an author. A veteran technology executive, Alex has worked with blue chip companies across the globe for more than 20 years and has served on multiple boards. She is the co-founder of Include Me Consulting and the founding member of the World Metaverse Council. Her focus areas include neurodivergence and leadership, emerging technology, and the intersection of innovation, technology, business, and people. Alex is known for her broad knowledge and straightforward and often irrelevant style. Her Amazon
irreverent style.
Irreverent style. Sorry, Alex. Her Amazon #1 selling book, Risking Irrelevance, was published in 2023. Welcome, Alex, and we are super happy to have you here. The stage is all yours.
Fantastic, Chris. Thank you so much. And everyone, lovely to be here. Lovely to see some of you again, or at least see your names in the participant chat. So I am here today to chat to you a little bit about neurodivergency in the workplace, and really what that looks like and why people need to pay attention to it. So, oopsie, where's my presentation gone? Right. So as we've noted, I am, this is the make me look impressive slide. I am a global speaker. I'm a renowned technology expert. I've been in the technology industry for more than 20 years. And all of that stuff we don't really need to worry about. But the bottom one is really what I'm going to be chatting to you today. And that is I'm neurodivergent. And I'll explain exactly what that means just now. But before I do, let's get into not about me, but about you. What do businesses want? And before I change my slide, I'm going to apologize up front because this is an inclusive presentation, which means it is my worst kind of PowerPoint. Everything I say is going to be summarized on the screen. It is not that text heavy, but it is a text heavy presentation because not everyone in this world listened or is able to process audio in the way that most people are. I, for example, have closed captions on in all my meetings because the time it takes my brain to process what I'm hearing, I can miss things. So because of that, I'm actually going to be putting all the information up on slides rather than my preference, which is to say, going to have images rather than text, because if you're reading, you're not listening. But what I've learned over the last couple of years is actually there are times and places where information is useful, and a webinar is one of those because I'm really here to share information with you today. So what do businesses want? Well, at the end of the day, we know that they want more money. They want to be profitable. But what does that really look like? Well, if you ask executives, you're going to get a lot of the same sort of answers. You're going to get people saying that they want increased employee retention. It's very expensive to replace people. They want better productivity. They want your people to be working hard and getting good output. We want people to be more creative. We want people to innovate. We want them to solve problems. And if they want these things, it suggests that they don't really have them. But here's the problem. 14 to 19% in South Africa of your workforce will resign this year. That is the standard stat. If you are in the UK, that figure is closer to 30%. You're in America, that figure is above 30%. Fortunately, I don't know the Australian stat, but around the world, it is anywhere between 20 and 30% turnover rate from voluntary resignations. So your workforce is going to be changing over the course of this year. Even if people do not resign, 46% globally are looking for another job. This has highs, and knows the highest figure I've seen in the States is 95% of people surveyed were looking for a new job. Admittedly, that was from monster.com, which does help people find new jobs, so makes a lot of sense. But people are still looking for new jobs. They're looking for opportunities, and the world is getting smaller, not bigger. So people who previously could only work in their city can now stay in their home and work for a job that is on the other side of the globe. So people have a lot more opportunities. And then just a South African stat for you, 50% of South Africans don't feel psychologically safe at work. This means that they do not feel comfortable raising if they have a problem. They do not feel comfortable talking about themselves, and they feel that they have to fit in if they're going to be able to, not just to get ahead, but if they're going to be able to keep their job and not rock the boat. Now, this stat is similar in other countries, but we have a pandemic of people who are unhappy at work, and one of the reasons that they're unhappy at work is that they do not feel safe at work. So let's talk about me briefly and why I'm talking to you about this today. So, got my nice little dinosaur pic there, and I'll explain that now. But when I entered the workforce, I was the get things done girl. You know, you would ask me and I'd say, I'm efficient, I'm effective, and I get things done. And that was very true. I was the go-to person to drive things forward and make sure things get completed. And then I had kids. And yeah, I was still going up in my career in corporate and still doing good work, but it was hard. It was a lot harder than it had been previously. And post-pandemic, I've now got 2 kids and my memory is completely gone. My short-term memory, I maintained that I could plan a surprise party for myself because my memory is so bad. That's my dinosaurs. Oh crap, was that today? That is me. And because I was feeling a bit down about myself and I just, you know, didn't really have the energy for anything. So I'm sitting and I'm scrolling on TikTok. And I liked some videos about neurodivergence and ADHD in particular. And I liked some more videos about ADHD and I liked more. And here's how the algorithm works. If you start liking content, it starts pushing that content towards you. So you get more of it. So I kept seeing this content, I kept liking it, I kept getting more of it. And eventually it occurred to me, oh, well, maybe I should go and see something about this because this sounds a lot like me. And yes, I duly went, took myself off to the doctor and was diagnosed as having ADHD. So that means that I struggle to focus. I struggle to get started with things. I struggle to finish things. I'm still very good at getting things done, but a lot of what I do is very much based on urgency. Importance, meh. Urgent, that's going to get me to the finish line. And because I'm ADHD, I was still making changes to this presentation 2 minutes before we started today. And that is not unusual for me. Then, when I talk about neurodivergency, let's just chat a little bit about what that means. So around the world, anywhere from 15 to 20% are considered neurodivergent. Now, this term came up in probably the last 20 years or so. It covers a broad spectrum of people, and we'll go into what those people look like. But we know that about 1 in 5 people can be considered neurodivergent. That figure goes up if you're working in STEM organizations or STEM business, STEM industries. So anything in the sciences, anything in technology, that figure can go up significantly. And certain surveys have shown that some of these people, some of these industries and businesses have an incidence as high as 50% of their employees identify as neurodivergent. Now, really, what does this mean? Well, neurodivergent just means that it's different brain types. We have a different operating system. So we're experiencing and interacting with the world in a very different way than the world has been set up for. And part of what the world is set up for in general says that this is how we should think, this is how we should learn, this is how we should behave. But that's actually not the only way to do things. And this has been a really interesting journey for me. Both my kids are neurodivergent. And what I've learned about the education system and what works for them has been completely eye-opening. Actually taken both of my kids out of mainstream school because it was quite literally giving them anxiety attacks. And they're 8 and 10, you know, they're young. And if that's happening at that age, it only gets worse as they get older. So learning for myself and learning for my kids that there are different ways of doing things and there is no right way was incredibly freeing for me. And realizing that brains are just wired slightly differently. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think this is perhaps where we get a bit confused. We consider a lot of these things disorders, but actually it's just a different operating system. It's Windows versus Mac. The neurodivergent folk, we're the Macs. Most people use Windows. The neurodivergent folk effectively have the Macintosh operating system. Now, if you try and run a program that is built to run on a Windows laptop, you try to run that on a Macintosh before it's been adapted for it, it's not going to work. Likewise, if you try to run a program that is built specifically for a Mac, it's not going to work on a Windows machine. Much like your Android or your Apple device, you can't run an Android app on an Apple and vice versa. So it's literally just a different operating system, which means you've got to work with it a little bit differently. And the important thing here is to remember, at least in a work context or in any context, differences are not deficits. It's not to say that they're not struggles that go along with this, but we need, by embracing the differences, we actually gain a lot of benefit as individuals, as society, and backed up by scientific research as businesses, a very positive impact to the bottom line. So what does neurodiversity include? Well, we talk about neurotypes, so that's different brain types. So the ones you've probably heard of, autism. And when you think of autism, if I say, think of somebody autistic, willing to bet most of you are probably thinking about a young, nonverbal white boy. Am I right? Can't see anyone nodding because only one person has the screen on, but that is what most people think when they think of people who are autistic. Now, what autism actually presents as is its difficulties in understanding social cues or social norms, its sensory issues, and it's a very aligned to pattern thinking. So if you saw back on my screen about myself, you would see that I'm ADHD, and that means that I am autistic and I'm ADHD. What does that look like for me? Well, if I say to you, hi, I'm Alex, and I don't like artificial light that much, and I'm not great with people I don't know, and I'm quite an introvert. You're going to go, yes, absolutely, I understand. Like, me too. If I say, hi, I'm Alex, and I'm autistic, start like backing away a little bit because there's stigma there. And part of what we do when we talk about neurodiversity is really to take away that stigma, to say, hey, this is just a different kind of normal. Then we've got ADHD, which stands for Attention Deficit and Hyperactivity Disorder. And most people see this as the person who can't sit still, the kid in the classroom who's disruptive, the person who's walking along and then... So that's what most people think about when they see ADHD, but it actually presents in a lot of different ways. People with ADHD are often very impulsive. They are often have struggled to focus. And it's something that we call executive dysfunction. And it can happen across the entire spectrum of neurotypes. But it's a great term, is executive dysfunction. Sounds fancy. I like that. I'm an executive. I have executive dysfunction. This is a good thing to have. Except it's actually not. Executive dysfunction means that it's very hard to have the activation energy to start things. It means that I can be sitting there. I can know that I have to do a task. Let's say I have to respond to an email. I know I have to respond to the email. It is important that I respond to the email. I know what to say, and I know I'm capable of responding to the email. But I cannot respond to the email. My brain will not let me respond to the email. Sounds weird, doesn't it? Like, come on, Alex, it's just an email. So the best way I've seen to describe it is, imagine you're by a hot stove. Now, you can tell your brain, put your hand on the hot burner. And your brain goes, no, that's going to burn me. That is the same sort of thing that happens when you have executive dysfunction, is that your brain stops you from being able to actually get that task done. So when I was first diagnosed, and I am on medication, it works for me, it doesn't work for everyone. When I was first diagnosed, firstly I saw, hey, my head is quiet. I'd never had a quiet head before. My head is always noisy. But beyond that, I was able to send an email, 2-line email, that I had been meaning to send for 3 months. This is not unusual. But for the first time, I was able to actually do it. I was like, oh my goodness, for the first time in 20 years, I understand how people are able to arrive at work, sit at their desk, and work for 8 hours straight. I was never able to do that. My teams used to laugh at me because I would sit down, I'd work for 10 minutes, I'd get up, I'd go and speak to someone. Rather than send them an email, I would get up and talk to them. Then I'd come down, work some more, get up and do something else. We need to solve a problem, let's go and have a coffee and talk about it. So I was a jack in the box the entire time. And I didn't realize that was because my brain is not wired to sit down and work straight for 8 hours all day, every day. But, and this is something that again happens in autism and ADHD, What I do get is hyperfocus, which means if I'm interested, if it's urgent, if it has to be done now, my brain goes, cool, I can do this. And the best way I can describe this, when I was writing my book, I basically rewrote the entire thing in a week. Because I went into a hyper-focused state that says this has to be done the date, I have to get this done by Friday. I basically have to rewrite the entire thing because my brain said, hey, I've done this once, don't need to do it again. Yeah, it turns out you do. So you can sit in a hyper-focused state and you can get, people joke that you can get done a week's worth of work done in 4 hours. And some of that actually is pretty close to being true. But obviously it comes with its downsides as well. And people judge us on our best. And most days, I can't work at hyperfocus all day, every day. When I have it, it's great. But most of the time, actually, I am darting between different things because my focus just isn't that focused. Talk about other neurotypes. The big one is actually dyslexia. Dyslexia is difficulty with brain reading words. There's a lovely meme that says, if life gives you melons, you might want to get tested for dyslexia. But actually what dyslexia looks like is the letters and words move across the screen. It's worthwhile Googling what dyslexia looks like. There's a very nice GIF that shows you what it's like. It's a little bit hard on the eyes, but that really shows you what people's everyday experience is like. And about 10% of the globe is dyslexic. On the other hand, people with dyslexia are amazing spatial thinkers. They're amazing entrepreneurs. So on the one hand, they have something that makes it very difficult for them to work. On the other hand, they can see things in ways that other people just can't comprehend. And that's one of the reasons why they make such great entrepreneurs. Dyscalculia is basically dyslexia for maths. So you have issues with numbers and spreadsheets and patterns. But people with dyscalculia are often incredibly creative. They've worked out how to do things in a way that they can't necessarily tell you how they did it because the pattern isn't there, but their brain knows how to get there. So basically think of it as dyslexia for maths. Dysgraphia, that's really around fine motor control. Your brain and your movements are not completely aligned. And then we get into the more mental health side of things. So Tourette's can be considered something that's on the spectrum, OCD, and a number of different types of mental health disorders. But that last one there is important because the other thing that's on the neurotype of neurodiversity is neurotypical people. This is what we consider to be roughly 80% of the world, and this is who the world is designed for. So everyone is actually included in neurodiversity because all it means is different brains. Now, when we think of neurodivergence, we tend to think of it in terms of disorder. And in fact, when I've got a couple of doctors on the call, when people are looking at diagnosing neurodivergence, what they do is basically try and figure it out according to assessment criteria, a lot of which are based on how disruptive or how difficult they are to interact with normal people. Not exclusively, but that's a lot of what it comes down to. So let's look at some of the strengths around neurodivergence. So there's a lot of precision in critical detail-oriented tasks, especially people who are autistic. They do fantastically in work where there's a lot of analysis. They do fantastically in technology. So there's a lot of precision and a lot of attention to detail. Neurodivergent brains are great at this. Design and technical work, that three-dimensional and spatial thinking, innovative problem-solving solutions. If you want an out-the-box thinker, find someone who is neurodivergent because they're going to come at you with angles that you've never considered. They might not even know where it came from, but they're going to bring such interesting and creative solutions to your problems. Exceptional concentration levels. Yes and no. So hyperfocus, exceptional concentration. For those of us who are ADHD, it is often the opposite, but we still get stuff done. We're great with deadlines. My family always said, you know, we're all journalists. I'm the exception, but we're all journalists because we're great with deadlines. Yeah, Mom, that's the undiagnosed ADHD. However, robust memory and recall abilities. Again, I have issues with short-term memory, but long-term memory, my memory is fantastic. And you also have a lot of people who have neurodivergent brains have really, really good short-term memories. It just happens that my segment of it doesn't. On the plus side, there's a party this weekend, and I have no idea what's going to happen, but I know I organized it. And then the other one is above average resilience and perseverance. And all organizations say, we want to be anti-fragile, we want to be resilient, we want to make sure our employees are able to keep going when times get tough. And one of the reasons for this, and it's actually kind of sad, is that an average neurodivergent kid gets something like 10 times as many criticisms as a non-neurodivergent child. So we're resilient and we persevere because life has been set on a high difficulty setting. Doesn't mean that neurotypical kids don't have it more difficult, doesn't mean that things don't happen in life that make other people's lives more difficult than ours or difficult than mine. But on average, a neurodivergent divergent child is going to have a lot more struggle than his neurotypical counterpart. So what do you do about this? Actually, wait, let's look at the challenges. So you may have heard some of these things before. Isn't everyone ADHD these days? It's so trendy to be neurodivergent. It's so faddy. No, autism did not exist before the 1930s. It's something new. And why should my company change for me? It's my problem, not their problem. And likewise, companies go, why should I have to do something about this? Like, you know, they must deal with it. So let's quickly address some of these myths. So isn't everyone ADHD these days, or isn't everyone a little bit on the spectrum? And the answer to that is no. Everyone has characteristics and everyone has times where they exhibit the same sort of signs as you would have if you were ADHD or autistic. There are days when everyone is going to be scattered. There are days when everyone is going to be excited and focused and able to do more than they normally would. There are days when people are going to be super creative, and there are days when people are going to be absolutely innovative and be able to think outside the box. But where the difference is how much it affects your everyday life. And if it is fundamentally and massively affecting your day-to-day world, if you have to make accommodations to be able to interact in a normal world, then the odds are good that you're sitting on the neurodivergent spectrum. And that's why we talk about identifying as neurodivergent. A lot of people around the world, it's really hard to get a diagnosis. Australia, Diane over there, it's very hard to get a diagnosis because it's seen as trendy. So a lot of people, we talk about identifying as neurodivergent because people see the signs and they see the symptoms because there's so much more information about it out there. And because of that, they say, okay, I have this and this and this. Okay, and these accommodations and these changes in my life are going to help me. So what? If they're not medically ADHD or they're not medically autistic, does it matter if they found things that work for them? No, it doesn't. Will they get diagnosed? Again, does it matter? And that's the problem for corporates. We often expect people to come with a doctor's note if we're going to give them anything. So let's jump to that one. Why should my company make changes for me? So this was something that my best friend said to me. She's in the Netherlands. We worked together at the same company for a long time. And she said this to me, and she is also ADHD and she's also autistic. And I said to her, look, how would your life have been different if you had been allowed to wear noise-cancelling headphones at work, or if you were given a pair of noise-cancelling headphones? What difference would have made in your life if there had been a quiet space in the office where you could go where there was no cell phones, there was dim light, it was quiet, and everyone had to be quiet there, much like a library? And she sat back and she thought, and she said to me, it would have been life-changing. Such small, simple things, it would have been life-changing. And because of that, that is why companies should make changes for people. That is why people should ask for accommodations, because a lot of these things are not rocket science and they're not even expensive, but they're life-changing for people. They make things so much easier to get things done. And that ultimately is what we want. We want our employees to get things done. But let's look at autism. Didn't exist before the 1930s. Well, the used to be planet Pluto wasn't discovered until the 1930s. Pretty sure it was there the whole time. Much the same with autism, much the same with a lot of these neurodiverse conditions, is that they've always been there. We just looked at them differently and we called them different things. And let's look at, it's trendy to be neurodivergent. So this is, again, feeds back into, isn't everyone ADHD or isn't everyone on the spectrum? And it's because there's so much more information. We're living in the age of information. We're living in the age of social media. And so people are finding content that resonates with them. So as we say, the algorithm pushes to it, they get more content, it resonates more. And because of that, it seems like more and more and more people are becoming neurodivergent. But they're not becoming neurodivergent. They always were. They just didn't know about it. And for women in particular, it's very, very common to be late diagnosed. I was diagnosed at 40, and before I had kids, I just found coping mechanisms. But I can look back at my school career. I did not do homework once. I did homework the morning before every single day for my entire high school career. And I can look back now and go, oh, that's why. So that's what's changed. It's access to information. And then the next reason is why companies in particular need to care about neurodiversity. These are the top skills for 2025 as put down by the, brain has just lost train of thought, by the Davos people, the World Economic Forum. And the green ones: analytical thinking, complex problem solving, critical thinking analysis, creativity, technology, reasoning and problem solving. And I didn't actually highlight resilience and stress tolerance, ADHD, thank you. Those are things that are identified as neurodivergent strengths. Doesn't say that we don't have the other ones, and it's not to say that the neurotypical people don't have those as well, but these are strengths that we commonly see in neurodivergent people. So if you want those top skills, you need to start thinking about how you are recruiting for those top skills. So how do you go about that? Well, briefly take you through my little blueprint. So my partner and I came up with a change program to basically take companies from not knowing what they have. And to illustrate this, there was a survey in the UK, 500 different people across a large subset of technology companies. Now, the companies thought they had about 3% incidence of neurodivergence. When the survey came back, all anonymous, the survey came back, over 50% of people identified with being neurodivergent. It's a pretty big gap. So we go in, we assess what's going on, do a full audit of neuroinclusion and inclusion in general. We learn and we teach the companies what they need to do about it. We promote neurodiversity and inclusion. So it's a good inclusive program. It does not just say, okay, we're going to take this group. It actually catches everybody. Going to harness the talent, and then we're going to adapt it. A little QR code in the middle is if neurodivergence is something you're keen to chat about. That just takes you to my Calendly. So please, do feel free to reach out if you're interested more in the approach to the program of how we take corporates from nothing to actually being able to have a workforce that is more productive, that has a lower turnover rate. I'm very, very happy to chat. But very, very quickly, that's what we take it to, and we call it the alpha approach. And it lasts over about 12 to 18 months for a large organization. And we've seen really, really impactful benefits of doing this sort of program. So what is the rest of the globe doing? We'll talk about what we're doing. What is the rest of the world doing? So companies are prioritizing neurodivergency. They're prioritizing hidden disabilities. So when we think of disability, we think the guy in the wheelchair. We don't think the guy with chronic illness. We don't think the person with ADHD who is coming apart at the seams, but they're trying to sit down and get all their work done. In the UK, there's special emphasis placed on this. And in fact, it is put into legislation that companies have to be inclusive of neurodiverse people. There's a big drive for inclusion because of its impact on business. Some of the largest organizations are focusing on neuro-inclusive programs, specifically because they've seen the benefit for it. And we're seeing companies start to integrate across the employee life cycle to be able to say, this is what we should be doing to be more inclusive for all our employees. This is what we should be doing to change our way of work to meet the future of work. And really, global best practice looks at four different parameters. We've got recruitment, we've got retention that really looks at the employee life cycle. And within retention, we've obviously got processes and policies and all of that side of things. We've got training, so actually explaining to managers, how do you work with a neurodiverse workforce? Explaining to employees, how do you advocate for yourself? What can you change as an individual to make you work better and feel better? And then there's the physical space design. And just to give you a few of the international folk that are doing this, Wells Fargo have a great recruitment program. They started in 2020, specifically aimed at recruiting neurodiverse individuals. They've recruited 290 people specifically with that program who are on the neurodiverse spectrum since 2020. 97% of those people are still with the company. JP Morgan Chase, in the retention and employee life cycle side of things, they have a couple of programs, one of which is called Autism at Work, and the other one is called, they call it BEST. And what BEST does is it matches people's talents to the areas they should be working in. So it takes those strengths and says, you know what, Alex, you're here, but we see that you are this really innovative thinker. We need your help here. And they realign people based on what they're good at. And that's for the neurodivergent folk and the non-neurodivergent folk. Barclays as well, they have a really, really widespread program that looks at neurodivergence. And Barclays actually has taken it a step further, and they now offer all of the applications that they offer for their banking clients have aspects of inclusion included with them. They do a lot of training, so does JP Morgan Chase, and that is available to people across the organization to learn more about neurodivergence and how to really work with people and to become more aware of it. And basically answer the question, how do we help? And then on the workplace design side of things, HOK is one of the largest design companies in the world. They have a massive focus on neuroinclusion. And just some of the companies they've worked with, they built a whole new campus for LG, another one for Honeywell, another global company. And they're really looking at how do they change spaces so they're more comfortable for people. Some people want more busyness around them. Some people need as little as possible. So I've said, I spoke earlier, I've got a bit of auditory processing problems. So I prefer somewhere that is quiet. I can't stand having music where it's got words, because then my brain hooks onto the music and singing the song. Whereas if I have music that doesn't have words or there's white noise, I'm great. A coffee shop is one of my favorite places to work with my noise cancelling headphones in, because a nice little buzz comes through, but I'm not picking up any of the conversation. And that really helps my brain get in a space where I can say, hey, I want to work. Whoopsie. So these are just some of the companies around the world. You might recognize one or two. I know some of them are a little bit obscure. I mean, I don't know who those Amazon people are. And yeah, I've never heard of Virgin. I'm not sure who Google are. But, you know, I know that some of you might recognize some of these companies. These are all companies that are committing to do more with neurodiversity at work. And this is really important because we've got global players who are seeing the benefits of utilizing the skills they already have and I'm trying to get more of these skills in place. So this isn't just me saying, hey, you know, I think that you should actually be kinder to me and, you know, give me a job because I'm neurodivergent. This is me saying that all of these companies, and this is just a small selection, are committed to doing more about this because there are benefits associated with it. So what are those benefits? Well, we know there's a talent exodus. Wherever you are, you've got a talent exodus. People are struggling to fill important roles. And on top of that, we've got generational risk factors. So one of the reasons to do this is you actually mitigate this. A happy neurodivergent will never leave you. Well, they might, but basically 42% of neurodivergent employees, according to a UK study, are very likely to leave your organization in the next year. With just a few tailored adjustments, that figure drops to 18.2%. It's a massive difference in your turnover rate. Intergenerational risks now, especially when we talk about Gen Z and actually Gen Alpha, so that's my kids' generation that's coming up, they exhibit or perhaps are more comfortable with more neurodivergent presenting traits. So they are going to want the opportunity for more flexibility. They're going to want the opportunity to have a quiet space, to have a busy space. And we need to start thinking about not just what do we as the older folk in the organization want, not just what we think people want, but we need to start accommodating across the board for all people, because we're going to be out of the business. Not going to take that long. We're going to be out of the business. And the guys who are coming up, they've got a very different mindset, and they're your future employees. It's your future boss. That's your future customers. And by looking now and making a culture that is safe to talk about this now, that is willing to accommodate people now, is really going to set businesses up for the future to be able to remain relevant. Talk a lot about relevance. This is really about remaining relevant. It's about building that psychological safety. I have a lot of people coming up to me after talks going, how can I tell my company that I have ADHD without saying I have ADHD? How can I tell my company that I'm autistic without saying I'm autistic? What can I do to be able to get software that's going to help me with my dyslexia? Because I don't really want to disclose that I've got dyslexia. And then it's a conversation about how do you talk about what you go through without using the words. Spoke earlier about how I'm an introvert and I don't like artificial light. And if I chat to my company about that, saying, you know what, can I have somewhere near the window because I work better with natural light? Sure, Alex, no problem. If I say, hey, I'm autistic, they're not going to be talking to me very much because the stigma is so real in most organizations. And it has to start at the top. You can do a lot with employee resource groups. You can do a lot with employee support, but you really need this buy-in from the top down. And curiously, a lot of really senior executives actually are themselves neurodivergent. They just don't know about it. And there was a very good study in 2020, which basically showed that more inclusive organizations, neurodiverse and other inclusion, they showed increased productivity, reduced churn, and better business outcomes. There's actually, as I said, there are research journals that have studied this, and there is a definable ROI that comes from putting reasonable accommodations into place. So what do I want you to remember from today? It's really that a quarter of your workforce is wired differently, up to a quarter. If you're in the tech industry or one of the STEM industries, it's probably more. You're not making the most of those differences. In fact, a lot of those people you probably don't necessarily consider good employees because they are not set up in an environment or with a work practice or with a work culture that is designed for them to thrive. By making some very subtle changes, you can completely change someone's world and you completely change what they do for you and how they do it. And by looking at ND stands for neurodiversity, looking at neurodiverse initiatives, you can reduce churn, you can improve your hires, get more productivity, increase employee engagement, and you can enhance brand value. Now, we don't guarantee all these things because it obviously depends on the organization. If you're paying lip service to this, you're not going to get very far. But an organization that is committed to making changes that are going to scoop everybody up, to be inclusive to everyone, by making very small and simple changes, those are the organizations that are going to remain relevant. Those are the organizations that are going to be the organizations people want to work for. And those are the guys who are going to be reaping the benefits and reaping the profits as we go forward. So I'm just going to leave that on screen. I'm going to open up the questions now. That's just some of the things people have said about Include Me, which is the company my partner and I have started. But please, there almost always a lot of questions around this, including how do I know if I am neurodivergent? So guys, please, any questions that come through, any comments, the doctors in the room, if you would like me to correct me on how I identified the different neurotypes, please do. And let's have some conversation. Oh no, nobody's asking questions.
No, thanks, Alex. It's Andrea here from Australia.
Hi,
Hi, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Interestingly enough, neurodiversity, neurodivergence is quite a common conversation we have down here at this part of the world. A lot of it is because we're kind of driven down here by an industry that deals with under a broader term of disabilities. And what's actually happened here is that they've seen a greater increase in the number of individuals who are being diagnosed with some form of neurodivergency or neurodiversity. So they think that around about 30 to 40% of Australians, and you can put Kiwis in that as well, New Zealanders do suffer from some level of this. And what's interesting is that there is something called the Diversity Council of Australia, who have been having these kind of conversations actually since about 2020. So it's interesting how there already is I guess somewhat of an acceptance around these areas. And for example, I was at a Queensland government event at the beginning of, sometime in May, and one of the largest construction firms, which is Hutchies or Hutchinsons, or Hutchies as we call it here, they have actually partnered with an organisation called Help Enterprise, and Help Enterprise actually looks to provide employment opportunities with people with divergency. And so we're already starting to see a shift and change in the way that many larger organisations are operating. So my question to you is, if we disregard the 5% of the top, top 100 uber-duber companies, like the ones that you've mentioned, and let's bring it down to the predominant 97% of the small business to medium sector, what do we as small business employers, what should we be looking at, knowing that we don't have an unlimited resource to support this, the vast elements of neurodivergency? How do we as small business owners support?
So a lot of that, it's as simple and as complicated as listening to your people, to actually having the conversation. And it's as simple as a team conversation to say, hey, what time do people work best? Maybe it's a case that, okay, we know that Alex is no good first thing in the morning before her second cup of coffee. So instead of having a 9 o'clock meeting, maybe we'll have a 9:30 meeting. Maybe we will put into place something that says our core working hours are from 10 till 3. So you've got to be contactable then. But beyond that, whether you're doing work at 3 in the morning or 10 o'clock at night or 5 in the morning, it doesn't matter as long as your output is correct. So how can you move from hour-based to output-based? And there's a certain amount of trust that goes into this, but especially with smaller companies, it's actually a lot easier. It's about making an environment where it is safe to have that conversation. It's safe for me to come to you and say, hey, I'm really struggling to focus at these early morning meetings because I'm not a morning person. In my case, I am a morning person, but I might come to you and say, hey, you keep scheduling meetings at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I am not at my best. I'm not bringing my best at that time of day. Can we maybe do these important strategic meetings earlier in the day? So not necessarily for me to disclose, but for me to have the conversations about what would make life different for me. So it's really about saying, it's not about asking questions, it's not about forcing people to come forward, but it's saying to, I've done this with a lot of my teams, and it really makes such a difference. It's about saying, how do you work best? How do you want to work? What works for you? Not me telling you, me asking you, and then letting them do that, letting them experiment with that. I've worked for a technology company, and one of my teams there, they came out of a unit that had a very high churn rate. People were leaving on massively regular basis. I think the figure was over the 20%. That's sort of our maximum here. And they came into, and it was a small team, but I basically put all of the onus on them to figure out how they work best. This is what you've got to get done. You guys figure it out. And they did. They were a fully remote team based across the country. I think only one city had more than one person in it. And they figured it out. They are high output. They are high delivery. They're highly communicative. And no one left that team for 3 years. So little changes make a really big difference. And as I say, it's as simple and as hard as having the conversation and listening to the people. The one other thing that I would say is have a look at what sort of technology options there are to support people. For something like dyslexia in particular, there are some very good technology out there, some Chrome plugins, some very good programs you can buy. And say we will get this for you and you don't have to provide a doctor's note. It's going to cost you more to go through the process to get someone to prove that they have dyslexia than just to actually give them the license. So, and that I recommend for enterprise as well as small businesses. It just, if someone needs something, don't ask them to jump through hoops to get it. Just give it to them if it's reasonable. That's where we talk about reasonable accommodations. So yeah, that's my advice for small businesses, and just sort of open yourself up to the fact that not everyone is going to do the things the same way, but that doesn't mean the way they're doing them is wrong.
Thank you for that, Jace, Alex, and Andrea. just to hook up on that as well, coming from having the medical background, just raising awareness is a very good start, and that's what you do, Alex. And I've just been, this year a grandchild of mine has been diagnosed with ADHD and autism as well. So I'm more aware of that as well now, and I'm going into that more and more. But coming from a medical background, we know that with any health issue or any diagnosis, you need to raise awareness. I mean, with us here in South Africa, HIV, cancer awareness, all those things. If people are just more aware and getting educated, they are more open to help these people and accommodate them much more. So I was just thinking now, Alex, what is your experience in this field now that with helping these corporates, being a consultant, or would you do more awareness talks with them? I know you've got a whole program, of course, to assist a company, so they have to reach out to you if they do find that there's churning happening, things like that. But I would just love to go and talk to everybody about it and just raise awareness and then assist them in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So it all starts with awareness, and both me and my partner do a lot of awareness talks, and those aren't, going out specifically to sell. It's not talking about the program. That is just giving people information about it. And a lot of the times when people talk to us before we go and actually do work at companies, it's because someone, as you say, they know someone, their kid is neurodivergent, their wife is neurodivergent. So often it's actually a human-to-human conversation where they come in saying, how can I help? How can I help this person? I don't know what to do. And that doesn't mean they're going through a full consulting engagement. That's a cup of coffee and saying, you know what, my kid's also neurodivergent. This is what I found. This was my experience. And sometimes that's just what people need, is an understanding that, hey, this isn't just you. It was the most amazing experience being diagnosed as neurodivergent, because the first time, there's a great cartoon, but it says that there is so much power in realizing that you are a completely normal zebra and not a weird horse. So for the first time, I knew why I did things a certain way. For the first time, I was able to find things that would help me through other people's experience, and also be able to kind of look at how the world's set up and how that needs to change. I mean, my kids in organizations as they stand today, they're not going to do so well. They're not going to be happy. They're going to be miserable. And I keep saying, I really hope my daughter's going to be an artist, because current corporate is not set up for her. But that's one of the reasons that I actually do this, is because I want to see change with companies so that people can go into organizations regardless of their operating system, and actually be able to have a good experience, whatever they decide to do. And just another, I do post on LinkedIn about sort of the public talks. So yeah, please do connect with me on LinkedIn, and then for the public talks, anyone can just can join in and find more about neurodiversity, because it's so Australia and the UK, there's a lot of knowledge. Although Australia, curiously, the doctors, I've talked to a lot of people where the doctors aren't willing to diagnose because they go, oh no, you just saw something on TikTok. But in South Africa in particular, it's a very new concept. And there's certainly pockets of that globally where it's either a new concept or it's something that's treated with a great deal of skepticism. So yes, awareness is really the first step to really being able to do something about this.